Senior Librarian here at the library. So this year's theme is recognizing El Segundo's centennial, and the theme is images of the past become stories of the future. So for our Southern California History Writers panel, we have Judith Gerber as moderator. And Judith is a second-generation Angelino, a farm and garden authority, and has also written about sustainable and urban farming, local foods, and organic gardening for more than 20 years. Judith's books include From Cows to Concrete and Farming in Torrance in the South Bay. So please help me welcome Judith.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for inviting me, and I'm so excited to meet fellow SoCal history writers. I'm going to switch glasses because I have been writing for 20 years, so that when I read the questions and the biographies, I get the information correct. So we have pretty much an hour, and there's 6 panelists, so we're going to probably not cover everything that everybody hopes we can. But hopefully it'll tweak your interest so that after the panel you'll be able to visit each author upstairs at their table. So I'm just going to not be that creative and go alphabetically, if that's okay. So starting with Jan Dennis. Jan Dennis is an amazing woman. All of our authors are amazing people, but Jan is a resident of the city of Manhattan Beach and has been for over 50 years. She's written 7 books. She has an interesting story. History includes being active in the civics of the city for over 40 years, including having served on the city council and as mayor, only the second female to ever hold that post in Manhattan Beach. And she is also was involved as an active member of the Neptunian Women's Club of Manhattan Beach, having served as its president, and the local historic society. And I know you're still involved with some of those activities, are you not? Yes. So she really has hands-on, interesting insight into the community and used her own personal collection, which is now being in the process of being donated and accumulated to Cal State Dominguez Hills, who has a wonderful archive, so your collection will be available fairly soon to everyone to view. So what I thought I would do is just introduce everybody and then ask everybody the same questions, and maybe after we go alphabetically I'll switch it up a little bit. So welcome, Jan. Next we have Louis Fuerte. Am I saying Fuerte correctly?
Yes.
Louis' book is Louis, Take a Look at This. So for many of you who grew up in Southern California like I did and who watch PBS and KCET, you might be familiar with the program that Louis worked on for many years. For a man who, we might know his name, Huell Hauser, but Louis was the ubiquitous, Louis, take a look at this behind the camera. And Louis now come out from behind the camera to share his stories of working with Huell. And what I found interesting about your book was I learned what you had to do behind the scenes, and it was a lot of work and it was hard work. So hopefully you'll be able to talk to people about that. But Huell Hauser was the hugely popular, exuberant host of California's Gold and other California public TV shows. And he was always exclaiming, Louis, take a look at this. So Louis is not just a cameraman, but he's an award-winning cameraman who has won a total of 5 Emmy Awards for Huell Hauser's show, California Gold. And your infectious love that your host had sort of seemed to be contagious, because a lot of the ways that you film things really were shown through the programs. I thought that was fascinating. Louis is the son of a Mexican immigrant, and Fuerte was born in San Bernardino. Is this true? I'm reading hopefully factual information. You became a cameraman after 2 years in the U.S. Navy, and you attended LA Valley College. I at one time attended LA.
Actually, San Bernardino.
San Bernardino College, really?
San Bernardino College.
See, that's incorrect. And you went to Valley College to study, or San Bernardino College to study engineering? Okay. Besides your Emmy Awards, you have been named Latino of the Year and have been inducted into 2 Halls of Fame and won the Golden Mike Award, the International Monitor Award, and the Salt of the Earth Award, which I find that a fascinating name for an award, and if we have time I would love to hear what that is. So you are now retired and live in Rialto, is that true?
Rialto, yes.
So,
wife.
with your lovely wife, and we don't need to, unless she's wanting to be known publicly, we'll just thank her for coming. Next we have Charles P. Hobbs, right?
Yes.
And your book that you're talking about is the hidden history of transportation in Los Angeles, which seems very fitting because LA is car culture, but we've had lots of other interesting things. And looking over Charles' book, there are a lot of things that I learned that I did not know. So it's incredible that the transportation from our iconic freeways, Union Station, LA International Airport, and our ports have obscured many offbeat transit stories. Some of our triumphs, like the Vincent Thomas Bridge and the Ground Link bus pool, have existed alongside such flops. This I don't remember. The Santa Monica Freeway Diamond Lane.
Yeah.
People remember that? See, I do. People are nodding vigorously, so they remember that. And the Oxnard Los Angeles Caltrain commuter rail. The City of Angels lacks a propeller-driven monorail, which I wish we had one of those, but you talk about it. And a freeway in the paved bed of the LA River. So, Charles, is this current that you still are a systems librarian at Compton Center for El Camino College in Compton?
That's currently, and I'd like to add that we have just got on the path to get our accreditation back.
Awesome. Congratulations, Jay.
Well,
And is it also true that you had edited the transit guide for the Southern California Transit Advocates for a number of years, from '96 to 2008?
yes, that's true. That was a collection of,
Oh, and he has an interesting blog, which I've checked out, More Than Red Cars, historical transit blog. So welcome. Next, I'm going fast because, we want to make sure we get everybody time to answer. Can you all hear me and understand me? Sometimes I talk too fast. I'm a writer, not a speaker, so that should be obvious. Next we have Kenneth Pauley. And Kenneth's book's on the 1910 Los Angeles International Air Meet. So the International Air Meet was the first international air meet in America in January 1910 on a mesa called Dominguez Hills, which is a story many of us have heard and some of us haven't heard a lot about, so another interesting tale. The enthusiasm for aviation grew after the first international air meet in France, and one of the American aviator Glenn Curtiss won 3 prestigious speed prizes and 36,000 francs. Wow, that's a lot of money at the time. It would also invigorate the local economy. So the air meet influenced aviation in Southern California and transportation worldwide. So I'm hoping that this is an accurate bio, but Kenneth can correct me if it's not. You worked closely with Dominguez Rancho Adobe on your book, is that true?
Yes, I did.
And many of the images in the book are courtesy of Cal State Dominguez. Is there anything else? I couldn't find a lot of bio info on you that you'd like to share with people?
Probably as many pictures from DRAM that I got also at the Dominguez Hills, University of California, Dominguez Hill. About half and half of the pictures, and there are about 200 pictures in this thin little Arcadia publication.
So be sure to check out his book. Next we have, and I hope I pronounced your name right, Jeffrey, SAMUDIO?
SAMUDIO, yes.
Oh, I got it right. Hey. So your book is one of the first books that I saw of an Arcadia book back in 2001, the Images of America collection of Los Angeles, California. And I thought it was really interesting, having written a book from Cows to Concrete, how from Cows to Concrete we talked a lot about how Los Angeles was known as a cow town and it was probably nothing, and then it grew into what it's become today, and that you shared with the public in your book, how it transformed into the magnificent metropolis that we know today. So the collections that you researched a lot were University of Southern California and the LA Public Library, which both now have wonderful digital collections. So welcome, Jeffrey. Is there anything on your bio that you would like to share that I can't cover here?
I will be about to start my 30th year in business, 18 of which as an architectural practice, but mostly as a historic preservation consultant, and co-founded the first academic program in California for historic preservation at USC, which is now a part of the School of Architecture.
Wow.
But I would like to also add that the collections of images at USC were bequeathed by Bank of America when Security Pacific was bought out. And so I was the young work-study student who was cataloging all of those. And so for me to do a book was just a matter of getting the university at the time to digitize. And digitization led to ease by which the book could be published. And I was the first author in California for Arcadia Publishing.
You know, I thought I had read that, and before I said that, I'm glad you made sure that that was true, because I didn't want to claim something false. And I don't want to say last but not least, but on the end we have, and is it SCHAADT or SCHAADT?
Yes, SCHAADT.
SCHAADT. Now, you are the director of the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium, and you've written 2 books, right?
I have.
One was on Cabrillo Beach, and then the other at...
Actually, it's kind of a companion.
It's kind of a companion.
Natural history.
Natural history. And you have a lot of experience and background and interest in this area. You have been involved with marine science education for more than 30 years, graduating with a bachelor's in marine biology and a master's in biology from Cal State Long Beach. You've taught biology at a local community college and bring your strong background to science education and now into history, which I also find fascinating. So that's just a really quick overview. Now I'm going to switch so I can see the audience. So basically, when I was given the privilege of being moderator was how to figure out how to discuss everything with everybody in the short amount of time we have. So what I thought I would do in general is sort of ask everybody, and I will start with Mike this time at the end. How did you become interested in this topic, and why do you think it's important to share it?
Well, when we were approached, and my co-author Ed Master was in the back of the room there, by the way, when we were approached at the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium to do a book, Arcadia book, Arcadia history book about Cabrillo Beach, I said no. I don't want to be writing a book. So they came back to us again and said, look, are you really serious about it? This is something that we think is important. And we'd had a chance to think about it, and I talked to Ed about it. And we figured that if somebody didn't write this book about Cabrillo Beach, somebody else would write it, not the aquarium. And it makes it really nice to have a piece that we could talk about the Cabrillo Beach and the rich history of people at Cabrillo Beach and the museum itself and now the aquarium. So I went back to them after turning them down once and told them, okay, I'll write a book with some help from a friend. And in fact, I think it's 2 books. So we ended up writing 2 books rather than the one they asked us for originally. And basically that's how it all got started. Now these are 2 books that are available in our gift shop and talk about Cabrillo Beach, which has a rich history and certainly has also a rich natural history of the animals and plants that live there too. So it worked out real well.
Okay, and I'm going to jump around now. Jan, I know. So you have so many books that you've written, and you're working on another one. So how did you told me the story the other day, how you kind of got roped into writing your first book, but maybe you want to share that.
Well, thank you, and thank you for asking me here today. It's great fun. I served on the city council back in the 70s, late 70s, and I happened to be mayor at the time, and it was the 75th anniversary of Manhattan Beach. And I kept telling my partners on the council, the gentlemen, someone needs to write a book on the history of Manhattan Beach. And there had been some pamphlets out, but not very much written about it. And they said, no. It's 75 years, I have relatives older than that, I'm not gonna, no one needs to wait. Well, I persisted, and they persisted. And finally, very undignified, one of the councilmen said to me, Jan, you want a book, go write it. I said, okay, I will. And driving home that night, I thought, oh my Lord, what have I done? I worked for a publishing firm in New York, but I was on the boards, which means I was on the graphic side of it. And, but never had written. In fact, my English teacher in high school wasn't too happy with me in English. But anyway, I took it on, fell in love with it. I just love doing research, and it's been a great experience for me. I am working on my 8th book right now, which many of you in El Segundo may be interested in. However, it only goes to Rosecrans. I'm doing the history of Sepulveda Boulevard, 100 years of Sepulveda in Manhattan Beach. And it's coming along, manuscript's done. Now I'm doing the layout, and so that's basically it.
And doing it yourself. All right, I'm going to switch to Charles now. Would you like to talk about how you got interested in why you write about history, why you share it?
Well, let's see. Probably around, I'll get a short version, around 1984, I got interested in public transportation, and A few years later, I started my library science education, my master's degree. Part of my project was to work at the library that was and is operated by what we now know as Metro, back then was RTD. Working there, I had got access to a lot of history about the transportation system in Los Angeles. A few years later, I was playing with a database. It was the ProQuest LA Times online database, and I started plugging in a number of the old names and companies, old transportation companies from the past. And it turns out there's going to be a lot of articles about them. I collected them and said, well, maybe there's a book in here, so I started writing it. I submitted it to two other publishers. They turned it down, and then somebody from History Press contacted me and said we might be interested. Sent them the proposal. They said, hey, we want to write your book. So I just went ahead and whipped it into shape. By November 2014, it was out.
Exciting stuff. Great. And Jeffrey, how did you end up writing about Los Angeles? Oh, well, you said you were working at...
The influence of that work-study job was great, but I had a thriving architectural practice. I didn't need to deal with books, but I was at a National Trust conference in Savannah. If any of you have read the book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, the Lady Chablis was sitting on my lap as the president of the National Trust, Dick Moe, was sitting next to me saying, yeah, Jeff, you should, this Arcadia Publishing from Britain, they're coming over here. They're going to be big in this country. And they managed to get another drink in me, and I said, okay, I'll do a book. I'll $4 sign. So that unfortunately led to the realization that a new publisher in a region where they were trying to do something that nobody had ever done, selling books, 5,000 quantity printing at one time, they could make a profit on it, and they did. And they're now down to communities of interest where you can have, I think, book sales of 300 to 500 books, and they're making a profit on it. So that was really wonderful, but the real impetus was to realize that most people that I knew were dying, who were older than me, the historians, the generation that had, was connected to the original generation that built this region. And I had an obligation through my understanding of how to digitize my association with USC that I felt obligated to do that. And it was a very good influence. I was put on a federal commission as the state architectural historian member for the California State Historical Resource Commission. I was a UN consultant for many years, managing World Heritage Sites in Oceania. And it led to wonderful opportunities that I never would have imagined in college, wanting to be an architect and urban designer. But it's really provided the real flavor of understanding the context by which I design and build, and by which I save buildings, or I can't save buildings. And so those stories needed to be told, and I was reminded very often, especially with when AIDS came through, there were a lot of, probably everybody in local history knows, there are a few stalwarts in your neighborhood that know a lot of things, and usually it's maybe those people who don't have families or something, so they adopt their communities and then they become historians for those communities. Many of those voices were being lost, and so I felt an obligation to step forward.
Great. Kenneth, how did you end up writing about the air meet?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, how did you end up becoming interested in writing about the air meet?
It goes way back.
Well, in the interest of time, maybe the condensed version.
Well, it started in 2009, the year before the 100th anniversary of the centennial of the Dominguez Air Meet. And going back for studying the history of the first International Air Meet, which was on the plains of Bethany, at a little town called Reims in France, where there's a racetrack. And they had a wonderful air meet in 1909. It was international because one of our pilots in America, Glenn Curtis, was a participant. And it turns out he was a sensation in Reims and won 3 major prizes, a lot of money, and came back to America. And so the book deals with the 1910 meet and how it came about, who were the founders, where it was, participants, the grandstands, everything about the details, who were members of the aviation and the judges committee and the executive committee and all these details. It's just full of a lot full of details. And 200 pictures. My favorite picture that was taken is on the cover of my little Arcadia book, and it shows a 5-winged plane by Jerome S. Zerbe. He was a professor at Los Angeles High School, and also an ex-lawyer, and he had a couple of gentlemen build that airplane for him. Fortunately for him and the grandstands, it did not take off. There's no telling what would have happened if it had gotten airborne, but that's my favorite picture of the meet.
Interesting. And Louis, so your story is a little bit different. I mean, there's not quite as old as some of the history that we did, but what made you decide to go ahead and write this book to tell about your work with Hewell?
Well, whoever thought I'd be doing this, it's just something that was out of my realm, and I was a quiet photographer like these gentlemen back here, doing my job and stuff like that. But when Hewell passed away, and he donated everything to Chapman University, they came to me and said, you need to write a book about your experiences, things that happened behind the scenes, because you're the only one that knows what really happened. And there is some quirky stories about things that happened with Hewell and myself, like Hewell falling off a horse, which you never saw on TV, but all these quirky little stories are in there about Hewell, but I'm on this adventure of whoever thought I'd be doing anything like this.
Well, welcome to, I've heard from several of you sort of the same thing that, I mean, I never thought that I would write a book. I just collected stories and I became interested, and people start roping you into things, and before you know it, you can't stop researching. One of the things that I was going to ask all of you, and whether yours is a similar situation, Louis, and most of us, when we were talking, especially Jeffrey was talking about the digitization and images and collecting. That's one of them, has been in the past one of the most challenging things about doing a book and project like this. And I found when I was working on both of my books, and I'm working on another idea now, that I can't seem to stop researching images. I can't let things go, and trying to find the images and all that was a challenge. So one of the questions I always like to be asked is, what is one of your most favorite or interesting images and or places you got the images, and maybe briefly highlight one or so of those for people, because there are so many things now. Maybe as an addendum to that is when I first started working on my project back in the mid-2000s, there weren't things digitized, and you had to literally go old school and go to archives and research the photos. Now it's a lot easier. You can do it digitally, but some people still do it the old-fashioned way. So maybe just share the story about your image collection or archive, and Louis may adopt. I mean, I'll start with you. I consider all of the episodes, you probably had to research those as a type of archive. So.
Yes, I did. We had to go back, and of course, back then it was analog tape that we shot on, so it was digitized. And I had to go back and look at every tape that I shot with Hewell, and you talk about it. And there's some shows that I said, did I shoot that? It's like, but we had to go back, and then of course digitizing the pictures and all that kind was very challenging, but it was done.
Well, it's interesting because those of us who've done Arcadia books, and then for other publishers, Arcadia, you're responsible for getting your own images and providing them in the high resolution format that they need. And for somebody who's a researcher and writer who's never done that, that's very challenging. So that might be, we can go back to the end again. Maybe Mike might want to share a story or so from his process, or not.
No, a couple of them I think. First of all, I think you've already heard from my background, I'm a scientist, so researching came somewhat naturally to me. But the digitizing didn't. Well, I have another scientist that actually helped me, and that's Ed Mastro in the back. And he is particularly good at being able to take care of that part of it. So I thought we made a real good team where we would talk about what we wanted to come up with, and then we also were very fortunate that the museum, as a museum, had a lot of photos that were not digitized at the time, but it gave us the opportunity to digitize them for this book. So that worked out real well. And then the other quick story was, you never know where these pictures are going to come from. So we were talking about the natural history of Cabrillo Beach, and you're talking about seagulls and moon snails and all these things that I, as a marine biologist, and certainly these are friends of mine, but I was also told that they get red foxes down there once in a while. Well, we'd never seen a red fox at Cabrillo Beach. My son was visiting us one day at the aquarium on a Saturday, happened to have my camera with him at the time, my first digital camera, and a red fox was just behind the aquarium. And my son Chris was able to grab that picture, and son of a gun, that was what we used in our book to be able to talk about, see, there's some animals you don't see very often, and there's a red fox during the day walking across the street. So
Well, that was a stroke of luck for sure.
It certainly was, and I bet my fellow authors have a lot of examples just like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, there are stories just about telling the stories and gathering images, having people help you and getting permission and all that. Let's move on with Charles. How about you? A story or so you'd like to share from your experience gathering things?
Okay, well, as far as the images are concerned, I gathered some came from the city of Los Angeles, some came from the Metro Transit Library, some came from UCLA, some from USC. Believe me, some of those places are a little easier to work with than others. Metro, I know the librarian there, I can go in there, he'd give me what I want. UCLA, you had to go in there. Some of them were digitized. A lot of the ones I wanted weren't. I had to go to the negatives. You go to a special part of the library. They make you put on white gloves. And you take out one negative at a time, hold it to the light, look at, see if it's what you want. If it is, you write down a little form to tell them, and in about a week, they'll send you the digitized picture. They were expensive too. I think they wanted like almost $100 for some of those images in there.
Oh, that's a whole other story too.
Yeah, the cost of these things. I used USC, they didn't cost that much. California Historical Society didn't cost all that much. They were easy to work with. I think I got one image from a magazine. They wanted a lot for it too. I forget what it was, but it was a little more than 100. And but I was able to get it and put it in the book.
Oh, good. That we could do a whole panel on the cost and the access to images. It's something people aren't aware of, and you certainly, if this is what you do for your main avocation, you certainly are never going to get rich or make a lot of money. It's truly for the love and the passion of doing it. Jan, is there a story or so you'd like to share with us about the process?
Yeah, I have found that I've been very, very fortunate as far as my images. I've done 4 books for Arcadia, and I have self-published 3 books. And we have the folks in Manhattan Beach are so into helping out. And I have one gentleman who's here today that does a lot of the photography for me, and that's Neil Boyer. He's a great photographer, and I just am thrilled to have him aboard. But people will drop off things at the house, or they will call and say, gee, I just got this, would you like to have it? And I say, never throw a photograph away, or never throw a negative away. And that's why Dominguez is so interested in my collection. I have one room that is nothing but the history of Manhattan Beach. And you'll see it eventually, it'll be at the college. And the other people that I have to thank is my son, who is here today too, who is, I'm not online. I'm not online, I don't send emails, I don't do photography. But my son, he's my computer man, and I'll say, go look up the history of Rosenberg or whoever it might be, and he'll find it for me, and he'll say, I can't get out there today, but I'll be there next week, which is fine with me. So I'm very fortunate. I have hundreds of photographs, some coming from the Historical Society. In my younger days, I did do photography, but now I rely on the pros, and I'm so glad to meet this man. I just love his stuff. So it's great fun. Thank
Well,
you.
see, and Mike, now, you had that experience working with USC, but, or I'm sorry, Mike or again, did you? Yeah, Kenneth. Hello, Jeff, hello. I think I need some more caffeine. I'm like, this was, Jeff, thank you guys for putting up with me. Any stories you want to share?
Really a horrifying scene. In the late 90s, Northeast newspapers, Northeast LA went under, and as many newspapers folded. The archive of images was delivered to the Eagle Rock Association and my native Eagle Rock and Highland Park Heritage Trust, were each given copies of their respective newspapers. I knew, as the materials conservation side of my head, knew that we had about 10 years before all these images would be useless for digitization. So I managed to be the first elected to public office in the neighborhood councils for Eagle Rock. And the first duty that I had, we had about $100,000 discretionary funding from the city of LA for our neighborhood. And I made a motion for $4,000 to digitize our history, to save the story of who we were at Eagle Rock. And it was highly controversial. I was shocked. But I made a coherent argument that, listen guys, everybody seems to be talking about history one way or another, whether you want to accept it or not. Land use issues, other issues of community character and identity. It's all locked up in those images. We must do something in an aggressive way to save our history, because it will be gone within 10 years. And then it was a unanimous vote, I think, a few months later. But it took a long time for that to occur. If you have images, find a local institution, academic or city or otherwise, that, or like the Getty, to assist you with that, because for them, that's what their business is. That's where they get donors to donate their funds to participate in really good projects to lock in local history and to let us know who we are. Make it diverse, make it interesting, offer some context narratives. But really, you need to partner with somebody. Try not to do it all yourself, because it will overwhelm you. When I was the first publisher in California, Arcadia didn't have any assistance out here, and I ended up spending probably $25,000 in staff time just to deal with assisting them in facilitating everything with USC. My colleague, Dr. Portia Lee, who is a social historian, I was an architectural historian, although she's a better architectural historian and I'm a better social historian, I think. But we were really at our wits' ends to manage all of these things. So images were really a frustrating thing for us. And we had to rein it in, and now it's much easier. But you must always appreciate that digital images are not stable. You must assure that there's a backup for them, maybe originals. I hate to say it, the Library of Congress will still only accept original negatives, because they're negatives 150 years old that are still in great shape in Washington. So digitization is only stable for maybe a good 10, 15 years right now. The Library of Congress will accept digital with other, with glass plates or original negatives. But you have to remember, for long term, if you're really going to get into this, and if you really want to have a value and meaning for what it is that you're doing, think very strategically about how you are collecting and organizing your data, and partner with somebody else, and try not to be the only one who knows how to read the archive information that you have. That's imperative. We all have our own nuances of how we deal with things. Really, let somebody else in on your secrets, because I am horrible at that.
Oh, that's excellent advice. And I don't think we asked Kenneth to talk about a story or two while you were working on the Air Meat book that you found either interesting, fun, or challenging.
I do exactly what Jeff and Charles both said in terms of the sources of that they went after, the expense of getting them, and actually not the amount of collection, because you collect entirely too many. Many too many. My wife is here, she'll attest to that. Entirely too many. So you have to cut them back, you have to cull them. And doing that, putting up, particularly for Arcadia, picture boards. Like a chapter has a thought, it has a theme, it has pictures that come from maybe from Seattle, or it might come from France. Several of our pictures are from France. Or my favorite one in the book is one of Roy Namashu's dirigible. That's my favorite picture of all. It comes from the Smithsonian. It's very clear. it shows him landing at Dominguez with his mooring team, running behind him, so you can tell how slow this vehicle is coming in, running behind him, trying to tie ropes to pull him down. So the dirigible is going very slow. But that is my very, very favorite picture in the whole book. It came from the Smithsonian Institute.
Great. So I thought what I would do is it's fairly interesting to hear all the different horror stories and all the good things that came out of the projects when you think about working with the archives. But I also want to echo what Jeff says. Even if you can't get in touch with one of the larger institutions, even your local historic societies and even some local libraries have historical collections, and they can guide you if there's information that you want to pursue or to preserve. So what I thought I would do now is ask the question, and this is one of my favorites when I'm on the panel and I'm not moderating, is when you were working on your project or starting the project or even, whether the beginning, the end, the middle, what did you find the most surprising about either the process or what you learned from working on your particular topic? And we'll go reverse alphabetical, starting with Mike at the end this time.
So far I've talked about 2 books we did with Arcadia about Cabrillo Beach, but another book that I was a co-author on is the biography of John O'Gean, a very famous individual over in San Pedro. He was the San Pedro citizen of the millennium, so he did pass away in 2011. But in the process of doing that book, and I came into it late in the project, but I was kind of expected to do the Cabrillo Museum aquarium part of it. And I had spent many years there, so it was a smart thing to do. The other authors were not at the aquarium, they were in Florida. So what impressed me the most with that project was I got a chance to talk with John O'Gean, specifically about his biography. And this project was started, that's one thing I will always say about John O'Gean, he really saw himself, he was a great guy. What a wonderful person for the city of San Pedro to have to point to. But he understood that. He really felt as though the stories he had to tell were impactful for other people. So he convinced some people to do his biography, and 10 years later they weren't done with it. So he was getting pretty frustrated, and he came, and the authors happened, the people that were working with it at the time, he told them, look, if you don't finish this, I'm just taking your notes and I'm going to go to somebody else. And they decided that they would recruit me to kind of help them finish it up. I again told them, no, I don't want to do this, but nobody ever says ultimately no, or nobody did, to John O'Gean. So ultimately I did say that, and I think what impressed me the most was as I was checking to see his notes, or the people that took notes from interviewing him 10 years earlier when he was 79 actually. 10 years later, he was 89 when I interviewed him. And I had the notes in front of me that the people took, and I was just kind of checking to make sure things were right. What an amazing mind that guy had. At 89 years old, when I asked him a question about a particular point in his life, the most he would ever do, most of the time he would just tell me, and it was word for word what was in those notes in front of me. And the most that he ever did at 89 years old, when I asked him, John, can you remember about when that was? And he would do this. He would go, April 15th, 1962.
Wow.
So really, that really impressed me. And I cannot remember what I did last week, so.
I don't remember what I did this morning. That's an interesting story. So Jeffrey, what surprised you the most, or what was the most interesting thing you found in your work?
I think having the ability to write something that was readable. And I'm an academic writer. I think I can convey things, technical matters, but it was Dr. Portia Lee who made it readable as a social historian. And then we were very good checks on each other. Have somebody there that can really read something and be a layperson in how they read it. Just try to, history is all about telling interesting stories that catch the imagination and really link you back in time. And let you propel forward into time as to understand how history links back forward and backward all the time. And that was the hardest darn thing for me to do. I even had a friend who was a magazine publisher just said, listen, Jeff, you write for academic stuff, don't feel bad about it. And just let your hair down, step back, and just be a kid for a little bit and write it as, without any degrees or any self-consciousness about having to represent those degrees and have fun with it. And then the writing became easier, and I've written a number of other, usually biographies or specific small histories. Being a preservation architect, you do a lot of National Register nominations. Mind you, a lot of culling of those nominations in your communities could lead to really great books. People are always surprised by that. I'm doing right now one on the Arroyo Seco Parkway, which is what I did the corridor management plan for that 15 years ago for Caltrans, first non-Caltrans person to ever run a Caltrans property, but they weren't running it properly. It was historic. It's the first historic freeway in the U.S. So you never know where it leads to, but the surprising thing was just the ability to write for history and the audience and what are you trying to capture in them. And it brings you back to the basics and the fundamentals of why you're doing this.
That's really a good point. Different
if,
styles.
If you don't mind, I'll just
Go
piggyback.
ahead.
I know exactly what you're talking about because as scientists and as professional writers, we take classes in technical writing.
It's
So
way different.
every single word costs you in terms of impact. And sometimes it's not so easy to read those unless you have to. And that's not what these books are about. These books are engaging people and getting them interested in stories and storytelling. And I understand exactly what you're talking about, that I had to step back from my writing training and not write the way I was trained.
Be humble.
Great. Okay, so Kenneth, what's the most surprising thing that you found when you were working on this project? Or interesting thing, either one?
A couple. I believe the first thing was not knowing what impact that this air meet was going to have on the Southland and the world. As it turns out, being the second international, and there had only been two at the time, two international air meets and a lot of little ones along. I had no idea until we got really into it exactly what impact this meet was going to have on Southern California. It had a fond impact on exactly what was going to happen here, the growth of aviation, and also on the people who were there. Donald Douglas was there. Thaddeus Lowe's granddaughter was there, and most of you know her as Pancho Barnes.
Oh, yeah.
Lawrence Bell was there. Lawrence Bell and his brother, Lawrence Bell, became, of course, Bell Helicopters. Martin was not there. The year before, in 1909, he had flown first. He had made a deal with the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers were not there. They had gone to the courts and were suing everybody, thinking that they were the owner of everything that was aviation. It's too bad because there were 6 years there that they stopped making airplanes, stopped doing the research and going to courts. And that was too bad because the French came along and introduced to aviation history words like aileron, fuselage, empennage, nacelle. All of these words of an airplane are all French names, and their development was far better than the Wright brothers. Although at the end of the meet, we have companies forming like Curtiss Wright. They finally got together, although the Wright brothers were suing him tremendously all the time. Martin started over here at Glendale in 12, and there was Donald Douglas who wanted to be taken up by Louis Paulahan in his airplane. It was promised by him that he would take him up, but 4 days later he was gone. He never got that flight up there. He finally did fly. Of course, Boeing, we know what happened with Boeing, his company. So all of these things happened as a result of really the second air meet in California.
Well, that's amazing. Charles, what was the most surprising or interesting thing that you found?
Well, one of the things I found while I was doing my research is, especially for those chapters in my book that have to do with individuals, or Fuller, Motor Transit, Horace Dobbins of the busway, not the busway, but the Wooden Bikeway in Pasadena, Thomas W. Matthew, the first black neurosurgeon that put up a bus line in Watts. So there's so much information about them, not just about the transportation, but also about their personal lives too. You could practically write a whole book on any of those characters individually if I had wanted to. All the information in the newspapers, information if they had any dealings with the government. Those documents are public and you can look at them and piece together a story about where they were born, where they went to school if they did, type of businesses they got started in, what motivated them to get into the transportation business, what other issues they had, probably some personal background, how many children they had, when they got married and all of that. That was probably the most surprising thing I found out when I was putting the book together.
Louis, what about you? I'm sure you're still finding that out as it's so new.
Well, what I found out about writing a book, of course I had to work with a co-writer, and it's the slowest process I had ever worked on. Working in television, I'm used to shooting something, getting it done, and going into editing, putting the story together, and you're done. But writing a book to me was, oh my God, how can you? It took a lot of patience, and there were times when I just said, you know what, I'm not going to make it through this. But we did, and 3 years later, we finally have a book, and but it was an adventure.
I know I said I wouldn't, but I can't. If it makes you feel any better, my From Cows to Concrete book, my co-author and I, it took us 7 years.
Oh my God.
And we both had been working on the project individually before that, so,
Oh.
yes. Congratulations. And Jan, not last but not least, what was the most surprising thing from any of your projects or the process, whatever you'd like to share?
Right. Well, as far as the process is concerned, I thoroughly enjoy it. Coming aboard and no one doing it prior, I had a wide open field. And in fact, one of my favorite comments is that I was at a cocktail party one night and talking about the city and involvement because I've been in politics for so long and the history as well. And I got this little tap on the shoulder and this turned around and I didn't recognize this man. He said, Jan, I want to tell you one thing. Before you get into a book on the history of politics in Manhattan Beach, be 93 years old and move out of town. So it's been really interesting. And as I say, Manhattan Beach, there are names that have been involved in Manhattan, and I'll leave that up to you to read my books. But I started writing 30 years ago this month. My first book came out 30 years ago. And I've got 7. Number 8 will be in the next couple of months. And Dominguez wants to know, are you going to come out with another one? And I said, maybe. We're not pushing you. You know, we don't want your research, but if you want to, we'll put an office together for you down at the college. You can come and you can write down there.
Wow.
And
I'm jealous.
I'm tempted to do with it, that. But one of the startling comments that it wasn't startling, it was sort of funny. I wrote The History of Women of Manhattan Beach several years ago. And it's a coffee table book, and I'm proud of it. And again, I go to a lot of cocktail parties, but this gentleman walks up to me who is prior counsel. And he said, oh, I saw your book on women. When are you going to write a book on men? I said, I'm not. Just shocked to think that I said, you guys have been out there for so long. If you wanted a book, and it's the same man
Is it?
that did it to me 30 years ago. I said, you want a book, you go write a book about men.
Awesome. You're my new heroine. Thank you. So I just thought, I know a couple of you already answered this. It's for my last thing before we take questions. Is if anybody on there, I know that Jeffrey had sort of shared, why do you think it's important, regardless of your particular subject, but why is this history so important to share? So whoever would like to, maybe a couple of you want to chime in and then we'll take questions. How does that sound? Anybody?
Well, I would like to make a comment about that. As I said, no one had ever pursued writing in Manhattan Beach before. And as I started into it, and I realized that the older families in town really wanted this info out. They wanted to talk about the red car that went down along the seaside, put in 1903. They wanted to know about the railroad that came to Santa Fe and why they tore it out, why it stopped. They wanted, because they said, we can tell you stories. You'll find that older people, bless them all, they want their heritage told. They want to say, I've lived in this town all my life, and this is what happens. And those are the people I just love to do interviews with, because they are so excited and they're so exuberant about what they did, and they're leaving a legacy to their community. And I think it's very important, just as Lou Hauser and Louis did. They're leaving a legacy to the state. I'm only doing it for the city of Manhattan Beach of 35,000 people, but it's important. And every time someone asks you about a history or what happened on that spot, go ahead and help them out, because it's a wonderful experience. You get a lot of kick out of it.
Anybody want to answer why I think history is important?
History is who we are. History is, for better or for worse, who we really can be. And in '98 at that National Trust Conference in Savannah with the Lady Chablis on my lap and President Dick Moe of the Trust of the Astronomy, and Lady Chablis is making me turn red while she says, "Oh, Dick, that's my favorite name." I am also being prodded to submit a grant request to be the first to obtain federal funds to document gay and lesbian history in the United States. I was shocked. I'd been on the State Historical Resource Commission at that time for California for 4 years, and I had already been developing a cultural master plan that's required by the National Historic Preservation Act every 5 years for every state. I was the chair for that committee, and I was wondering what trouble I might get into if I did that. And they put another drink into me, and then I signed the paperwork and gave it to Dick Moe, and he made sure that funding came through. The history that I've conveyed, I've had phone calls from my old bosses at the state resource agency saying, "Jeff, gays in the military, you saved 18 months on the process by which they could be recognized as human beings and serve their country, because you had already done the footwork or context survey for culture in the United States." There was no mystery as to, well, gays in the military, what will that mean for us? What is their desire for cultural context? Do they have special religious needs? Whatever. It was all down there in writing. But the death threats that I've suffered over the years, the attacks on my business, I have to remind myself, and I've worked in the South Pacific where I've dealt with coups when I'm dealing with World Heritage Sites. History is very dangerous too. It's the basis by which wars start. We're seeing tribalism in this country sort of raise its ugly head, and I've nominated for the National Trust the founding place of the Pentecostal Church. Well, there are a lot of Pentecostals who didn't like it that a gay man did that. So you have to do it because it has to be told. The real stories have to be put out there. Otherwise, we're putting in peril our future. Because if there is no accuracy done, if we can't at least be honest in our history of what's happened in the past, there's no way that we go forward without having war, hate, and people like me who have to happy-go-lucky, thank goodness, most of the time. But I have to realize the consequences on my life had been more than I ever would have thought growing up in a gay neighborhood in Northeast LA. But it still, when you have groups that are minority groups whose stories haven't been told, and you have a dominant culture that isn't very good at interpreting other contributions of others, you're in for bad news in the future. So try to avoid that, and it's so easy. It's fun, it's inclusive. You have to be politically correct. I was an appointee by Pete Wilson, Republican. Okay, so political correctness and compromise are good. They're never bad. If you hear anyone saying that they're bad, shame on them. Shame on them, because you know exactly what they're trying to do.
Thank you. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. That was like, you did that perfectly, like we rehearsed this to end right on time. So, do we have questions? Yes, ma'am.
Bruce's Beach, yes, I did. Several times, yes. And I think when you read the history, of that situation. You've got to put it into proper time frame. It certainly wouldn't happen today, I'm sure, but it is covered in there, both the police book and the history book, the overall history. Yes.
Yes.
I want to ask him, did the National Archives charge you for that picture?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, almost everywhere, everywhere we were charged. And poor Charles, I did the same thing at UCLA, had to pay exorbitant amounts to get anything out of there. But the problem is, it's easy to get a lot of pictures, but it's hard to put them down. And if you limit yourself to a 40 by 30, whiteboard, and only put the pictures of that chapter in that board, then you limit yourself, and you can throw the ones that you don't need away, and it's nice to have a wife that really's got a good eye, because she can do that for me.
There is a way to get it for free. Schmooze and partner up with an institution.
Yeah.
And just network the hell out of them and ingratiate yourself with them and then guilt them into it. And let me tell you, I've managed to get a lot of community groups to USC, and there was gratis, there was no charge, and I made sure that the commitment was followed through on for years sometimes.
It takes extra time, but and also promise them books and promise. Yes.
And you have to get involved politically with the institution a little bit, but it's worth it because it's a win-win. There are no losers financially or otherwise.
Any other questions? Other questions? Yes.
Oh, I get to ask that a lot. And actually, as a videographer, I kind of look at things differently, and the things that this state has to offer is just awesome. I mean, last year we had the driest, so we have the tallest, the lowest, beautiful. I mean, this state is just, the diversity is just awesome. So I kind of see it in a different perspective as an artist. So every place you go is just awesome.
Well, you certainly were able to capture that in your work, and he was in his storytelling. Because I mean, I have to be honest, there were places where there'd be an episode and I'd go, I'm not interested in that, and then I'd watch it and I'd go, wow. I mean, you managed to take something that I thought was going to be stale and dry and made it, aside from Yule's personality, the camera work I thought was wonderful. So,
Even on Lent, we did a show on Lent.
Lent, yeah, that's not my holiday.
Lent artists, so we were expecting to see anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there was all those little museums. It's amazing. Do we have other questions?
I just have a comment.
Yes.
I want to thank you all for your passion that you bring to each one of the areas that you've talked about. I applaud you for that passion, and that can be instilled in all of us, and continue to work diligently in sharing those stories and that history of each one of the segments that you represent. I want to thank you for that.
I also wanted to say, I know you have something coming up, but if people want to speak with each author individually, after we're done here, we're going to go upstairs and we're going to be at tables and do book signings for those who want to talk and ask specific questions about each topic or whoever they'd like to talk to. And thank you. I think I did it without messing up too. Oh no, we had one more question.
I'm going to stand so I can
Okay.
project my voice. I have a question for the panel. I really admire your experiences and the journeys that you've taken and where you are now and where you're still going into the future. And I would like to ask the panel, what is your take now of the new generation in terms of their interest in what has propelled you to where you are now? And how can we encourage the next generation to also value this very important kind of excitement?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
You're looking? Go ahead. We'll start, Jan, work our way down.
That,
Quickly.
I feel is a very, very important question, as I said before, about people and their families and the history. I have found I hire youngsters over at the high school, and they come in during the summer. Over the years, I've had different young people come in. And Dominguez, I work with a lot of the students from there because they're doing a project at school whereby they have to know their community. And they, of course, residents of Manhattan Beach, they'll come in. I say, you can come in, sit at my dining room table, use my research room. And I find that many times they'll say, oh my gosh, this is an assignment I really don't want to do. Well, when they get through doing whatever element they're doing in the city of Manhattan, they say, gosh, can I come back again? Can I do another project here? And I find it myself, I find very rewarding, but I think it does, they get the experience, and that's what they need, first of all. They need that experience of reading history. Don't give up on your history, and it's wonderful. And I find that the element that a lot of people, they don't want to be bothered with the kids coming and asking questions. I can sit and talk all day. If you wanted to come and go through my library or whatever, I'd be more than happy.
Great.
You can ask me anything you want to ask.
Anybody else? I know it's 2 o'clock, we're supposed to be done, but if anybody else wants to talk about reaching the young people, you can also talk to them upstairs, so.
I was just going to say that you heard this from some of my colleagues up here, and certainly you heard it from me that I was kind of talked into this. Let's never discount the talking into it that these youngsters will do as they get older.
Thank you.
If I could just add authentic experiences, reel them in with the notion that these are real places. It's not Google Maps. Let them know that they're at the beginning also of a new epic for human existence, that the digitization of the world, everything that we are talking about here that makes publishing like this so plausible, so cheaply, is fundamentally changing human existence. And let them know that their history of how they're defining it for the future is on the line here. And they're the ones who are participating, make that part of their understanding of the world.
Are we out of time? I think we are out of time. I know, we could talk all afternoon, but there's other panels.